What would Labour do?
Well, we've already talked about, some of the taxation decisions that the government have made around inheritance tax, capital gains tax, corporation tax, where you've given away money. People know about the ageing population for some time. We've cut the criteria so people can't get community care. We treat our older people at the moment like dogs. It's a disgrace. This is what Jeremy was talking about in Prime Minister's question today. You've given away money that actually, quite frankly, we need to spend. And it's not just about an ageing population. That is phony.
Have you ever been caught off guard in a high-pressure moment? That's exactly what happened when Angela Rayner faced off against Andrew Neil and things unraveled fast. But before we dive into it, just a quick favor. If you're finding this content valuable, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of viewers watch without subscribing. And it's completely free, but it helps us keep bringing you more honest political breakdowns. All set. Great, thank you. Let's get back to it. Angela Rayner came into the interview confident, ready to defend Labour's economic plans. But Andrew Neil, a seasoned, sharp political interviewer, shut that down in seconds. His very first question about tax policy left Rayner visibly rattled. She stumbled, she paused, and then she started deflecting because she didn't have the answers. This wasn't just a tough interview. It was a spotlight on Labour's weak preparation and a deputy leader who couldn't explain her own party's numbers. And it raises a deeper question for all of us. If the people pushing these policies can't explain them, why should we trust them to run the country? Stick around, because what happened next in the interview only made things worse.
Do you reverse the cuts on corporation tax?
I think that the cuts on corporation tax are missing a point because we need that money. We need that money at the moment.
Would you reverse it? Hold on.
Inheritance tax.
Would you reverse them?
But I'm telling you, Andrew, that our priority is
You're not telling me the question.
I am. I'm
answer.
saying that the cuts in corporation tax, the cuts in inheritance tax, the cuts in capital gains tax.
But where was the?
Well, what I'm saying, Andrew, and
no. What you're saying is wrong. They raised the capital gains tax to 28%.
What I'm saying is that they've given tax cuts to absolutely the richest in the country.
What's the cut in capital gains tax?
But what's really important, Andrew...
No, excuse me, I'm asking you a question. What's the cut in the capital gains tax?
They've cut the capital gains tax. They did that. They did that as part of the coalition government. And the amount of money that's going into the economy, you've not made it better. Our economy is worse as a result of 6 years of austerity. And now you're saying all of a sudden we can spend money. No, let me finish this point because you've interrupted me and I want to make this point. It's really serious to people in this country that you've told people we've got to live within our means. We've got to have this austerity. We've got to cut.
When asked about Labour's stance on corporation tax cuts, Angela Rayner stumbled. Instead of delivering a clear position, she resorted to vague phrases saying things like, "I'm telling you, Andrew, that our priority is," but she never actually finished the sentence. That moment raised serious red flags. How can one of Labour's top leaders fumble a basic question on tax policy? Sensing the weakness, Andrew Neil pushed harder, this time on capital gains tax. Rayner's response, even more unclear. And then came the blunder. She made a bold claim about Tory tax policy, but it turned out to be factually wrong. A major mistake that instantly shattered Labour's credibility on economic matters. As the interview dragged on, Rayner's attempts to sidestep tough questions grew more desperate. Her answers became even vaguer, and it became clear she didn't have a strong grasp of her own party's economic platform. The shift was unmistakable. What began as a confident moment to showcase Labour's vision turned into a televised collapse of credibility, and the public noticed. Within hours, social media erupted with criticism not just toward Rayner, but toward Labour's entire economic message. Social media backlash was immediate and unforgiving, as political commentators and journalists began asking a simple but devastating question. If Angela Rayner can't handle basic economic questions, how can she handle the pressures of government? This wasn't just a bad interview, it was the moment that could reshape public perception. History has shown that when politicians fail to clearly explain their economic plans, it doesn't just damage their reputation, it drags down their entire party's credibility. Rayner's fumbles weren't just embarrassing. They may have caused long-term harm to Labour's election hopes. Viewers were left wondering, if this is the face of leadership, can Labour really be trusted to manage the economy? And just when it seemed like the worst was over, Andrew Neil brought up an issue that made everything else look small. Housing. How could Labour's bold promise to solve the UK housing crisis actually be making the situation worse? The problem wasn't just the policy, it was the number behind it. Angela Rayner's plan to build 1.5 million homes was framed as Labour's, a bold solution to Britain's housing crisis. At first glance, it sounded ambitious, even visionary. But as Andrew Neil began to peel back the layers, the cracks in her pitch widened fast. Experts had already cast doubt on whether such a target was realistic. Given the serious constraints facing the UK housing sector, limited land, overstretched construction capacity, underfunded infrastructure, and a shrinking pool of skilled workers, Rayner stuck to her talking point, mandatory targets, but her answers ignored the real-world challenges standing in the way. Then came the turning point. Neil introduced immigration data into the conversation, and suddenly, Rayner's housing pledge collapsed under its own weight. If immigration continues at current rates, the demand for housing could far outstrip Labour's proposed supply. It wasn't just a gap, it was a policy blind spot, and Rayner's failure to even acknowledge it exposed a deeper issue. She couldn't connect the dots. Her vague responses about who these homes were actually for only made things worse, raising more questions than answers. Was this plan really designed to meet the needs of British families? Or was it just another political headline with no substance underneath? The gap between Labour's ambitious promises and the real-world pressures of UK demographics became impossible to ignore as the interview went on. Angela Rayner's refusal to directly address immigration's impact on housing only deepened the concerns. In fact, her comments seemed to contradict her own party's data, leaving viewers to wonder, has Labour truly thought through the long-term consequences of its housing plan? The interview didn't just reveal a communication misstep, it exposed a deeper flaw in Labour's policy framework. Yes, building more homes is crucial, but Rayner's failure to consider how immigration levels, infrastructure strain, and labour shortages all intersect with housing demand highlighted a worrying lack of depth in Labour's overall planning. By the end of the exchange, what began as a confident headline-ready pledge had unraveled into a tangle of contradictions and unclear, evasive answers. Viewers were left asking a serious question. If Labour can't get the basic housing numbers right, how can they possibly manage the far bigger economic challenges ahead? As the interview wrapped up, one thing was undeniable: Labour's economic plans are resting on shaky ground. Neil's questions didn't just expose Rayner's lack of preparation, they revealed fundamental weaknesses in Labour's approach to policymaking. And now, with public trust at stake, Labour isn't just facing scrutiny, it's facing serious doubts about its fitness to govern.
You need to get your policies right. What would the capital gains tax be under a Labour government, and how much would that raise compared to now?
But I've told you, Andrew, what our priority is. It's about how we invest in our public services.
No, I'm asking you how you would raise the money. How much extra money would you raise by changing the current corporation tax and capital gains tax structures?
Andrew, we've talked about in absolute detail about the current tax system.
Would you say
you've cut 50%? In my constituency, both of my councils have seen over 50% cut to their budget.
No.
How can Labour claim to manage a complex economy when they struggle to clearly explain even the basics of their own policies? This interview didn't just damage Angela Rayner's credibility, it cast serious doubt on Labour's competence as a whole. What's most troubling is the evident lack of depth in both their economic and social strategies. Once you look past the headlines and examine the details, Labour's big promises begin to crumble under the weight of real-world challenges. And now, many viewers are left asking, is Labour truly prepared to lead the country through its biggest challenges, or are they simply offering empty words dressed up as solutions?